movements, criminal justice is health justice. I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items. All sessions will be recorded, and so we will share those with you after the conference. All materials and slides will also be shared with attendees as well. Please use the chat and the Q&A on your right-hand side to ask questions, engage. Staff and speakers will also be sharing resources and materials as well. This will be a moderated conversation, and then we'll go into Q&A, so there will be time. So please do ask your questions. And if you need any help, please use the chat. Staff are on hand to help you. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Anthony DiMartino. Thank you.
Thanks, Monica. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much to CPEN for hosting and inviting myself and these amazing panelists that we have here to participate in this conversation. Really looking at how the criminal justice system, the public safety system in general, has really sucked up all the dollars and has not made it easy on us to build a public health infrastructure that responds to so many important needs in this state and in this country. A little bit about myself really quick. It's not about me, I'm the moderator. So just so you know who I am though, and my organization, my name is Anthony DiMartino. I'm the Government Affairs Director for Californians for Safety and Justice. We are an organization that was started back in 2012, 2013, really looking at how do we decarcerate the state and look at how we reinvest funding and savings from decarcerating back into the community, whether this looks like trauma recovery centers, work with violence interventionists, prevention, re-entry, substance abuse, mental health. We look to pass laws and responsible budgets to do this. I'm already seeing folks in the meeting that I know and I talk to quite a bit, and I'm excited for you all to be joining us and to answer your questions once we get into it. I want the other panelists to spend a few minutes introducing themselves. Tell us who you are, a little bit about your background and your organization and what your nexus is to this work, and then we'll get into the conversation. So I'm gonna start with Flo. Would love to hear from you, and tell us a little bit about yourself and the work and what brought you here.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Flo Kofer. Pronouns are she and her, and I am the Senior Director of Policy with Public Health Advocates. I'm also an epidemiologist. So this has been a really exciting, tumultuous, ridiculous last year. And so I'm really just glad to be here this morning to be able to talk about this important topic. Another role that I play is that I'm a part of the People's Budget Sacramento. I'm also the chair of the City of Sacramento has a 1 cent sales and use tax. And I am the chair of the oversight committee for that group. And so I'll be talking about the intersection of some of that work today and how it all kind of dovetails into what we're going to be talking about today, which is, health and criminal justice.
Thank you so much, Flo. Excited to hear, your experience. I got a lot of different experiences at a lot of levels. And I think that really is going to inform the work. So thank you for being here with us. Next, I'm going to go to, oh, great. Yeah, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Amber. Please, Amber, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and what brought you here.
Thank you, Anthony. Hi, everybody. My name's Amber Akemi Pyatt. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm calling you from my kitchen in Oakland, California on a lonely land. At a funny little moment, and you see I'm drinking my coffee. I was like, I feel like I need coffee in like a paper cup. So I went to my local cafe to make me feel like I'm at a real conference, even though we have to be virtual. So cheers to those of you who are also drinking your morning coffee. First, I want to just say thank you so much to Monica, James, and so many others at CPEN for putting this together. I know putting conferences together is a lot of work, even in a virtual world, perhaps especially in a virtual world. But by way of introduction, I work at Human Impact Partners, or HIP. We are a national public health organization trying to transform the field of public health to center equity and build collective power with social justice movements. I sent some links. I sent a lot of links. If whoever's managing that wants to chat our website and social media, blog links, that would be wonderful. We do research, advocacy, organizing, capacity building, and some more stuff. And I lead our Health Instead of Punishment program. And I included a link to that program page as well. But I thought it might be useful at the top just to say out loud our program vision, which is really what guides our work. which will give you a bit of an orientation to how we think of these intersections. So the vision of the world that we are working for is that we envision a society where all people are healthy and free, where we wield our collective resources to help, never to punish or hurt, where all people can get the care and assistance they need to repair any harms they've caused, to heal historical and ongoing pain, and to grow in community together, where there's no need for prisons, jails, detention centers, or policing, and where all people can thrive. So you can see some of our research and webinars. I included some links to that material too. But I'm from LA, even though I'm in the Bay. I'm 4th generation Japanese American, Yonsei, which really connects for me to the work I do to prevent state violence, though I started my career in interpersonal violence prevention. And I'm excited to share some more about our work later, including our coalition work locally in the state and nationally with different grassroots groups.
Thank you so much, Amber. Great to have you here. Really looking forward to the diverse conversation that we're about to have. Mervin, last but not least, hop in here, introduce yourself, tell us about the work that you do and what brought you to this work.
Well, thank you. First, let me apologize. I feel like I'm having some technical difficulties here because I don't know if it's my screen that's freezing up. I can see, but sometimes the voice goes out. So if you're talking to me and I don't respond, it's not that I'm not paying attention. I'll catch up.
All good. You sound great right now. You sound and look great, Mervin.
Thank you. I think it's all my grandkids using the Wi-Fi doing homework, distance learning. But thank you. My name is Mervin Brookins, and I'm the CEO and founder of an organization called Brother to Brother. And basically, Brother to Brother was born from the work that a few of us guys were doing in the community, helping people come home, re-enter in society, helping them get their lives turned around. We were doing it on an individual basis. And our councilman's wife, Dr. Gina Warren, said, you know what, you guys should do this formally and start an organization to do it. So that's what we've been doing. And basically, we're mentors for people with similar life experiences. One of the things that we try to do most importantly is model the message of accountability, transformation, and redemption. So we try to restore the value to individuals that have at one time or another made mistakes in their lives, been behind the wall, been incarcerated, trying to help society understand that these young men and women still have value. They still have things to contribute. And more importantly, not only society, but within the individuals themselves. So we do that a lot. We try to stay in our lane and work with those individuals that are not only coming home, but individuals that may be headed down that path. We try to reach them early and teach them the life lessons that we've learned through incarceration so they don't have to repeat those mistakes. So that's primarily what we do. We're not a large organization. We're not a bureaucratic where I say young men, but we just try to be boots on the ground and give back where we can. So.
No, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Mervin. I mean, we need everyone at all levels, right? We need everyone at all levels. I mean, I started out as a social worker thinking I was gonna be a therapist, worked at the city level, then went up to the state as a staffer. And, now I'm an advocate with a statewide national organization. And so we got people here on this panel doing all kinds of work. And I love what you said around people having value. I believe that too. And I believe that we shouldn't be defining people on potentially the worst day of their lives, understanding that the systems have been set up, which we're going to get into in a second, that have really set folks up to fail. And that's what we're trying to change, right? So I'm going to lay out one quick thing, but the question that I'm going to pose to you all, and I think I'll start with Flo after I just mentioned this about the criminal justice system as a whole, but how do you all define criminal justice, public safety? What are the terms you use? I know folks are starting to get away from using the word criminal. Some folks don't want to use the word justice because they don't actually believe the criminal justice system has justice really in it. So that's the question I'm posing to the panelists. But really quick, I wanted to highlight that this work with CPEN that CSJ started a few months back as a partnership was really highlighting how the state spends $50 billion on this criminal justice system at all levels, the city, county, and state level, right? Where we look at a $13 billion budget for just to run our 34 prisons. But we're talking about $50 billion, right? And what could just a sliver of that now of it do for the public health, social justice community, right? But we're not talking about just slivers anymore. We're talking about the whole thing, right? So I just wanted to lay that as the context, right? Is that we're talking about a whole lot of money that needs to be reallocated, reinvested in other places. But before we talk about where those places need to go, I'd love to hear from the panelists, and we'll start with you, Flo. Like, how do you think of this criminal justice system, public safety system, infrastructure or not infrastructure? Just I'll toss it to you, and let's get this conversation started.
Sure. That was a really great setup, because I think a lot of what we're going to be talking about over the next hour is going to be really related to just how much we invest in trying to warehouse and abuse people, instead of how much we could invest on the front end in people. And so that's really the angle that I come at as a public health person. Is, the old adage of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I would say it's probably worth 3,000 pounds of just outright punishment that is done to no end, right? And so that's really the focus here. I would say I agree with the many people who have said, criminal justice feels like a misnomer. I like to keep the word justice because I think it's aspirational, and I think we should always be using as a North Star where we're hoping to go. So I like to talk about it as imagining and creating a justice system that does not include criminals, because criminal is the definition. And it should be an indictment of the failure of the broad society and the systems that we have in place to be able to properly invest in people from the outset. Criminal is a definition that we apply to someone after they have fallen through the cracks and have ended up, in a situation where they have gone against what we have defined as the rules of our society. And so my whole goal is to abolish criminals. And we can do that systematically by investing in prevention and by shape-shifting the way that we move through societies. And so one of the things that we've been working on to be able to help to put this into place, and public health advocates, along with 20 other organizations, through the All Children Thrive initiative, which is working to actually, in a preventive way, help to invest in how do we make it so that we live in a society where from the outset, we invest in children and they live in safe communities. And so we're trying to redefine and reclaim public safety, because it has somehow become synonymous with emergency response. It's somehow become synonymous with law enforcement. And that's not really how we should be defining it. We should be defining it as, what are those preventive investments that we know lead to long-term success in terms of people being able to be healthy, people being able to live in places that are free from violence and are free from abuse, where their basic needs are met. And so we actually just passed in the city of Sacramento in October, the first in the nation public safety resolution that redefines for the city what public safety means, so that when we then look at our public safety investments, we're not looking at just police and fire and 911, but we're also looking at what have we invested in preventively. It is not a panacea. It is a first step. And then very next step we've asked, is, so how do we put this into place now? What is the roadmap that we're going to take? And those conversations are already happening. And the importance of that, though, is to really think about, what do we mean and what are our goals? And I think so often our goals are set up to respond instead of to, from the outset, do what we need to do and then figure out what's left over and how could we even think around that as well.
Wow. I mean, powerful stuff there. I think, two big things that I pull out of that, and I can't wait, and I hope we can hear from it later, from you later, Flo, about like how you did it, right? Like, I think there's a lot of folks that are talking about this, and I know my organization talks about shared safety at the state level, thinking about how we all need to own safety and wellness and health in the community, and it shouldn't just be first responder, law enforcement, DAs or judges that can have this ownership over what it means to, have public safety or justice. So really love that. Really can't wait to hear, you talk a little bit more about like how you actually did it at Sacramento at the city level. So thank you for kicking that off. Mervin, I'm going to go to you. I would love to hear, your thoughts around this discussion of what, how you define criminal justice or public safety. What does that look like, especially with you all doing so much of this work with individual folks and on the ground? Is Mervin frozen? Uh-oh. The grandkids taking up all the Wi-Fi, y'all.
My pro tip is always, if you can, hardwire into your internet so that you have the strongest connection, especially if you have to be on video.
Yeah, I hear that.
You didn't come here for tech support, but we do that too.
Well, what I think we need to do though is we need to use some of this money from the criminal justice system and put it into our infrastructure for tech for all of our communities, so that we all have better Wi-Fi in general, right? Well, we'll see if Mervin pops back on, but Amber, let's go to you. Give us some of your thoughts on this.
Happy to. So let's see, there are sort of a few layers to the question. One is that, so HIP, we believe that language matters. We think that messaging and framing really feeds into narratives, and a big part of our work, of course, is to change policy and law to make sure that that piece of our structures and systems is transformed, but also to really pay attention to the power of narrative. And as part of that, we do not use the term criminal justice for exactly the reasons that have already been alluded to, that we don't believe the system is designed to create justice for our communities. So of course, in its failure to create justice, it's operating exactly as it was designed to. So as far as the sort of interlocking systems that are used to punish and control and disappear our people, we refer to that system as the criminal legal system. We use that term to include policing, jails, prisons, ICE, immigration enforcement, immigration detention, state surveillance like probation and parole, and other systems that seek to control and punish our people. And we, one thing that I think has been a very alive conversation, particularly since the uprisings to defend Black lives in May and June began in the wake of George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder, Tony McDade, and too many others, is this conversation about abolition, which is in some ways still a dirty word, in some ways has come into the mainstream lexicon. And, I think one thing to say here is that I really appreciate the definition that Ruth Wilson Gilmore gives for abolition, that abolition is about presence, not absence. It's about life-affirming institutions, which to me really speaks to a lot of what I think about public health being about. Public health is about building environments and the conditions that are needed to be healthy and to thrive, including by building up life-affirming institutions, in Ruth Wilson Gilmore's words. And, one thing that's interesting, I think, is often the pushback to abolition is like, what about the rapists and murderers? And just to tell my own story, so my early career was in mental health research and direct service work with young people in Los Angeles who were experiencing PTSD, depression, anxiety. I eventually worked on a study with young people experiencing early onset psychosis, and thought I wanted to be a therapist also, Anthony, and was doing that work, and just the vicarious trauma was incredibly real. And I just want to give a shout out and lots of love to all of our direct service providers. I decided early on that I could not do that work. It was too much for me, but I was still really, really passionate about the communities I was working with, and really thinking about the question that really kind of haunted me was like, how could we have prevented these traumas? Yes, I'm so grateful I'm working on an evidence-based program to reduce the symptoms of these things, but how could we have prevented the trauma to begin with? And so I got interested in violence prevention, in particular violence prevention. Welcome back, Mervin.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I got interested in violence prevention. Just there's a bit of background noise, so I think whoever's off of mute, if you could go back on mute, that would be great. So wanted to do interpersonal violence prevention, decided to go back to grad school in public health to study that. So I've never been interested in healthcare. I did not go to public health grad school for that. I really wanted to think about prevention and how to do prevention work, and in particular do sexual violence prevention work. And I was in grad school 2013 to 2015 during the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, and worked on a program plan around what a restorative justice program could be for students on UC Berkeley's campus who have committed sexual assault. And it really made me confront and think about, am I more interested in punishing people, in criminalizing them for the actions that they have done, the harm they have caused, or actually interested in really helping people to understand the harm they've caused to prevent that type of harm again in the future? We know hurt people, healed people, heal people. And if we are actually invested in preventing and stopping sexual violence, we actually need to really sit with the people who are causing that harm and think about what they would have needed to not cause that harm and what they need now to repair that harm and to not cause that same harm in the future. So my pathway to abolition was actually exactly through work around rape prevention. So abolition is a future of abundance. It's a future of healing, and feels like it fits very neatly within the sort of public health ideology and frameworks that I was learning in grad school during that same time. So that's kind of, for me, when I think about the terms we use and the frameworks we use, that is what has led me to doing abolitionist work and bringing the work I do at HIP into that same fold as well.
Wow. I mean, thank you, Amber. I mean, I can relate to a whole ton of that, and really appreciate the perspective and you just kind of walking us through how you got to this idea and notion of the work and what the work means to you. So thank you. Mervin, good to have you back. Love to hear your thoughts. We're still talking about, how we think about criminal justice, public safety. Amber said the criminal legal system. Talk to us a little bit about what you think of and how you define criminal justice.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Well, can you hear me? Well,
yeah. I think I'm having a hard time hearing. Is anyone else having a hard time hearing Mervin? Yeah. Mervin, can you hear us? Might have to come back to you again, Mervin.
well, she hit the nail, always been on the back. Yes. Can you hear me? I thought I was good.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So I'm good?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay. So I was listening to Flo earlier, and I think she hit the nail right on the head in that the approach has always been one-sided. It's been reactive. There's not a lot of investment in the causative factors that led to or that lead guys down this path. And it's extremely difficult because what ends up happening is you have an disproportionate representation within the system of people of color, because that's where the
Did we lose Mervin again?
Yeah.
Oh man, he was just getting going. Okay, well, we'll see if we can get Mervin back in. So I want to throw back to you, Amber, and then Flo, please hop in as well. How did we get here, right? Like how did we get to where we are, where the criminal justice system in California, sucks up so much space, is the catch-all for all of our, in my mind, problems with, social justice issues, climate issues, right? How did we get here?
Yeah, so a resource I would love to refer people to is Critical Resistance, who's an organization that's been leading a lot of thinking on these issues for many, many, many years. And one of the things that they did and do a great job of is cataloging the history of policing and history of incarceration, which goes into more nuance than I could possibly do right now. But of course, specific to policing, the history of policing in the US is really rooted in slave patrols that sought to catch people who were running away after being enslaved. In the South. In the North, it was really an anti-labor push to push back against working class people. And the sort of institution of mass incarceration sprouted up only in recent decades, which to me is an important thing to remember, that this is not kind of like ICE sprouted up after 9/11. These are not naturally occurring sort of necessary systems or agencies. These are things that were created, these were choices, and we can choose to also divest from these systems and approach work to seek accountability, to promote justice, etc., through other mechanisms that don't harm people along the way. But I would strongly advise folks check out Critical Resistance's history of these issues.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you for pointing us towards critical resistance. Really appreciate that. Flo, hop in here and give us some perspective and thoughts on how you think we got here.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, just to build on what Amber said, I think a really great book, and I just dropped it in the chat on, is it WOVA? I'm not even sure how to pronounce it. That's the world I live in, where we have new programs that I don't even know how you're supposed to pronounce it, but a really great
Okay,
book.
I think it.
Oh, you're back.
I think I'm good.
Okay, awesome.
Oh.
So a really great book for that is called The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. And it really is one of those like completely change your perspective on things. It's something I recommend to people who, when we start talking about, abolishing the criminal justice system as we know it and rebuilding it, and, and getting rid of policing or defunding, and people are like, I mean, I get taking some money, but don't we need police, and don't we? And I'm like, read this, and then let's come back and have a conversation, because even if you're not fully convinced after reading it, it is helpful to really recontextualize the purpose and the operations and how all of this works. So what I often point to, and there's a really sarcastic way of just putting this out there, is, Amber said earlier, and I think Merv may have said it as well, like systems are perfectly designed to get the outcomes they get. So my question is, how's that working out for you? Right? Like really, real talk. How is that working out for us? Because we incarcerate more people than any other place on the planet. We have one of the highest, violence rate. I'm actually glad other countries are now starting to say, be careful if you want to go visit the US. The streets aren't lined with gold, and it's a pretty dangerous place on par with the rest of the world. Like, I think it's kind of ironic that Americans always want to know when they travel around the globe, is the other place safe? And I'm like, you live in one of the most dangerous places in the world that has one of the largest, economies, and is supposed to, and could afford to invest differently and have different outcomes. And I think that's been an intentional choice over time. And so when we look at, even just if we look over the last 70 or 80 years, right, if you look at the war on drugs, it's layered on top of redlining, right? And so the way that you were able to criminalize a whole group of people, most of them, black and brown, was because you told them where they could live, and then you only went and policed those neighborhoods. And so you got the outcome that you were designed to get, which was Harry Anslinger, who was over the DEA for the first 32 years it existed, was convinced that Black people and Latinos and Filipinos and entertainers used marijuana and other drugs, and it caused miscegenation. It caused the mixing of people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and he was fundamentally opposed to that. And that was all a part of, like, think about when he was alive and what was happening. We're post-Civil War, but not quite to Civil Rights Movement. And so it's this weird space where, how much space are we going to give to this changing America that we have here? And what does that mean for our social stratification, especially as white women were getting the right to vote, and all of these things were changing, right? And so that's all part of the history. And so you can't look at the criminal justice system and also not look at the ways that capitalism and the ways that, that we have tried to hoard power and hoard wealth in this country are designed. And so it's not surprising then that our criminal justice system is also deeply tied into our military industrial complex, and is deeply tied into low-wage labor for people, right? It basically essentially says, if you are a part of this system in any way, you're either going to make money for us at essentially what I have to call slave wages, right? Or you are going to not be able to, in the free market, be competitive to be able to make money, so we can depress your wages and we can have you be parts of these underground economies that are essential to, the way that the country works. but you don't get the protections of healthcare and the protections of a livable wage. Like all of that is by design. And so you can't have a conversation about criminal justice without talking about capitalism, without talking about policy, without talking about white supremacy. It is absent context if you do it that way.
Thank you, Flo. Yeah, I mean, there's so many nuggets from there that I want to pull out, but we got Mervin here, and I want to make sure while we got Mervin on that we can hear from Mervin. One thing I do want to highlight though is my org completely agrees with everything you're saying, Flo, and really picking out like the idea that even after someone has done their time, right? We talk about time done. When is it actually done, right? But people in California face almost 5,000 barriers because of a record. Right? That's what you're talking about, right? This underground economy, second-class citizenship. We're not allowing people to really re-enter. And I think this is something, Mervin, I would love to hear you talk about, right? I think you were starting to get going on a really good, spiel, but, talk to me about safety, talk about how we got here. And then we're going to start to pivot, like, where do you see the gaps because of this behemoth of a criminal justice system or criminal legal system? Are you there, Mervin?
Yeah, I'm here. Now share with me the question again.
Just kind of, I think we lost you, so I'd love to hear kind of what you were saying about criminal justice, safety, how you think about it, how your organization thinks about it, and then just a little bit about how you think we got to where we are now. And then the next question I'm going to have us talk about, just so other panelists are thinking about, is where are the gaps? Like where are we seeing like things most prevalent because of the space the criminal justice takes up? But oh dang, did we lose Mervin again? Oh, Mervin, you there? There you are.
Yeah, that's I guess the host is I should be good now. So first off, it's kind of, it's extremely difficult coming behind Flo because she just hits the nail on the head. She covers proportionate way
Mervin, you're really breaking up for me.
at the same.
Hey, Merv, can you hear us? Hey, I'm really sorry, y'all. Are you there, Mervin?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So as I was saying, it's extremely difficult to go behind Flo because she just covers it all. She really, really, it's it.
I'm still having a hard time, Mervin.
Focuses, but what I wanted to share was an interview with a reporter who was reporting on EDD fraud. I've seen work in the street, but some of those monies are being used to purchase guns, just like they're being used to purchase a lot of other things that people are involved with. And so after I said that, the reporter said, okay, thank you. And I said, well, wait a minute, is that the end of the interview? And he said, yeah, that's all we wanted to know. And I said, well, wait a minute. Are we going to talk about how those guns got into the community? Why and how they're so red?
Man, technology can be great, but also sometimes the bane of our existence. Really want to hear what Mervin's saying right now.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe if he turns off his camera.
Yeah. I can't. Well, he doesn't even pop up. Mervin,
in our community conversation, I said, well, we're going to talk about it because we're going to find those guns. But we don't want to talk about that. So that.
Yeah. Wow. I really want to hear what Mervin's saying right now.
I'm thinking maybe we should just have Mervin call in through for his audio so that at least we don't lose that.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. James or Monica, do you all think you can connect with Mervin on that? I'm
Yep,
gonna
I'm just gonna get a hold of Mervin right now. Just gonna
yeah,
get
I'm gonna just manually mute him, just because if he keeps coming in and out, and we'll just proceed with the conversation, then bring him back in.
That typical mind.
Oh, all right, y'all. Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear. Let's switch gears a little bit to like, how does this show up in your work? Like, where are you seeing the gaps, right? The needs that where you think this has most impacted you all. Flo, you wanna start with this for us?
Absolutely. And I think I can probably combine my answers to this and to the next question I think that we were going to talk about in terms of
Great.
Really just thinking about like law enforcement spending in particular. So the way that this shows up, I think most prominently is in the decisions that we make in terms of how money is spent. So I am actually not going to start with this slide. I'm going to start with this one because I think this is the more damning of the visuals. So for those of you who, or you probably are aware that there have been several stimulus packages that have been approved by the federal government, and the first one was called CARES, and it's the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And so in Sacramento, the county of Sacramento received $181 million. And the Board of Supervisors authorized the county executive to apply for and use the $181 million in April. And I love this slide because when you talk about the health impact of inaction is exactly this, right? We were still below 2,000 cases in the county of Sacramento when this money was authorized. And it took, and you can see at the bottom, community actions, right? So Anthony, I know you talked about like, how did all this come together? Well, Kula Koenig really pulled together a bunch of folks from across the county who were interested in this. And this was a diverse coalition of folks who work in public health.
Go ahead.
Folks who are small business owners and representing that community, folks who were representing the community of educators, all these folks who are like, look, we have a vested interest in making sure that the coronavirus relief funds are spent to do exactly that, relieve the stress that coronavirus has put on already tapped and sometimes low functioning systems. And so the community is asking questions. Where is this money going? How is it going to be spent? It's not until August when we have more than 7 times increased our coronavirus cases that we finally find out exactly how those funds were spent. And 85% went to law enforcement. Now, I mentioned in my intro that I'm an epidemiologist, and so I want to be super clear with you that you cannot shoot at, arrest, detain, or tackle coronavirus in order to be able to address the pandemic. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, but I just want to be really, really clear that there's a lot we still probably don't know about the virus and that we're going to learn in the coming years. But I can tell you for sure that none of the functions of law enforcement are going to help us in a pandemic. And so it is inexcusable and downright immoral that that's how we would spend our dollars. And so I'm just going to quickly, skip ahead because the big thing I wanted to show you is this is how we spent the money. We made health services essentially fight and scrap, and we gave them 2% of the dollars when this all was unearthed in August, and we gave most of it to the sheriff, 104 million out of 181 million, and then we gave the other to probation. And it's just astounding that this is how we thought we should spend, once again, the coronavirus relief funds. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, everybody probably did it this way because law enforcement is a black hole and they suck up all of our city's resources. If you look at most municipal budgets, they are primarily law enforcement, unless you happen to live in a place that is more affluent, in which case, and not surrounded by places that are less affluent, in which case they actually spend their city resources in a way that is preventive. But other than that, in most places, this is how we spend our money, even when new monies come in. But for this, we stand out in Sacramento as being particularly egregious. If you look here in the blue is how LA spent their CARES, again, coronavirus relief funds. And they spent it on things like public health and health services and housing vulnerable people and financial and food assistance and childcare to support their residents and small business support and county staff performing COVID-related resources and contingency planning because we didn't know how long we were going to be doing this. And then you compare that to just 6 hours up the road, how Sacramento, where the state's capital exists, and how we spent our coronavirus relief funds. It's unconscionable. And so it brings up the idea that what is the real impact of this? It is that we don't invest preventively in people's health and well-being, even in a freaking pandemic. We don't invest in that. And instead, we invest our dollars in places that don't make sense. And then it's not surprising that we continue to see cases go up, that we don't see testing centers in the places they need to be, that the vaccine rollout is going to be challenging. All the things that follow from that, that small businesses are closing, that people are struggling and worried about how they're going to pay their rents and mortgages when the eviction moratorium comes up. And we're not having a conversation about what it means to owe $20,000 in back rent once this is all over. Like, all of those things could have been prevented if we had spent this money responsibly, and we didn't. So I think that's the consequence to having a system that's designed this way, is that you see in a very egregious way what happened in Sacramento and what happened in several other places across the state and the country.
Flo, are you a lawyer? Like, you just made such a damning case. Wow. I mean, bringing all the receipts. I appreciate it. Amber, before I go to you, I want to just point something out too. Like, I mean, this is just egregious in my mind, like using the coronavirus relief funds for this. At the state level, there was specific funding going to the BSEC that was supposed to be kind of COVID related, criminal justice related. And the BSEC was just going to pass that down to law enforcement groups, like they always do. We, amongst other groups, advocated at the BSEC level, the Board of State and Community Corrections, to make sure that some of that funding at least had to, well, we asked for all the funding to go to community-based orgs doing reentry work, trauma reduction work. We ended up getting a commitment from BSCC to that at least 20% of this $48 million was going to go to CBOs. So not the win we wanted, but better than all of the money going to CBOs. But this is what happens, right? If we're not advocating, if we're not at the table organized, like you're talking about what you all did here in Sacramento, which is amazing, at the city level, this money just goes right to the black hole, like you're saying. So I appreciate that, Flo. And that's like kind of that level, right? Like it's happening at all levels, federal, state, and city and county. But Amber, would love to hear your take on where the gaps are, where you would like to just see. We're already getting close to time for Q&A. So really, where you'd like to see funding be reallocated to. What does this look like for your work?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. But I also do notice, Mervin, it looks like Mervin's Wi-Fi is maybe a little bit better. And I wonder if you want to sort of jump at the chance to hear from Mervin.
Oh, of course. Yeah, Mervin actually was not on my front screen. So sorry about that, Mervin. Love for you to hop back in and share with what you were sharing before.
No. I'm fine. Worst case scenario, I defer to Flo. I agree. So let's continue on, and I'll join in, as it opens up. But yes, I don't think it could be any better said than the way she put it.
Well, I think Mervin, maybe more specifically, and then Amber, you can hop in after. But Mervin, like you're doing so much of this work, like on the ground, direct services, right? Would love to hear how you all would love to see, relief funds, state funds, philanthropic funds, whatever, go to groups like yours. What would you be doing with that instead of it going to, the bloated criminal justice system? Well,
without question, we could do more if we had more. Our organization started out, as I assume most, whose ever idea was, whose ever passion it was, they pretty much put the money up out of their own pockets until they can start getting some support. But I believe our methods and the way, the one-on-one mentoring that we have, our ability to connect with these individuals that are re-entering society, as well as the individuals we work with that are still incarcerated, is tested and proven. We're examples of the success of our own program, but it's extremely difficult when the monies and the resources, like I believe there's never been a shortage of money. I think the problem is who that money has been going to. It doesn't come to the community, to the organizations that I believe that are really boots on the ground, that are doing the work. More often than not, is going to people who I call professionals at getting the money. They're big organizations. They have, paid grant writers. They're in the know, and they're in the meetings and all of that. So at our level, we're just not concerned about that because we're helping the guys that are coming home every single day, that are calling at 2 or 3 in the morning that needs help. And so for us, it's either you in one place or the other. Either you're on the street doing the work, or you're in the boardroom or you're in the meetings and trying to generate those type of resources. So that's been our problem. We've been all boots on the ground. We haven't had the benefit of people being our advocates in the at City Hall. We're just now getting into that, getting into the political side, getting into where Flo is, where with that type of knowledge, where we can advocate for more resources. But it's a challenge because the more we do of that work, it takes away from the work we're doing on the street. And again, we're just guys that are in the community trying to find a way to give back. And we would love the help and resources that would help us do what we do.
Well, Mervin, I don't think you're just a guy. I think you all are doing, honorable and just the important heart work, right? We call it heart work at CSJ. And I'd love to hear, though, just really quick, if you had more funding, what would you do with it? I hear you talking about the infrastructure capacity issue, right? Which I'm completely aware of and is actually something our organization's working on advocating for at the state level for groups like yours. But if you had that resources right now, let's just say, I got to imagine we have some, powerful people on listening to, but let's just say if the governor right now was listening in and you could say, hey, we need this, this, and this for these resources, right? What would that be?
It would be job training. It would be money. So one of the things when you're dealing with this demographic, most of these guys are only doing the only things that they know how to do. And so you got to get them out of that environment, get them different experiences that they can gravitate towards. So taking guys on transformative travel, for instance, exposing them to different lifestyles, but that costs money. So if you had a magic wand, the first thing I would say is I need jobs, but not just jobs. I need sustainable jobs where these young men can make a living and can take care of and women that can take care of themselves. Not a job that they're going to have to struggle with and they're still in the same position as trying to make ends meet. Because as long as they're in that position, they're going to find alternative ways to do that. So we need educational services, but more importantly, and I'll say it again and again, we need real jobs. Open up state jobs to people that have turned their lives around. Governor Newsom a while ago signed a bill, I guess it was, that allowed individuals that were once incarcerated that were fighting fires to come home and then be hired to do that. The problem is they're not hiring. You can sign a bill to say, hey, you can do that. But I know several guys that hey, man, I just got out of from the camp. I was up fighting this fire. How do I get into that position? How do I go back and apply? And we help walk them through it. And at the end of the day, it's a no. So, we need real jobs, living wage jobs that can help these individuals help themselves.
Yeah, I think one important note there, I'm glad you bring that up, and I put it in the chat. It's AB 2147 by Senator Reyes passed that or moved that bill, and the governor signed it. But the Firefighters Association pushed hard against that bill. They lobbied against it because they didn't want to look to hire these folks. So I really appreciate we can pass all the laws we want, but when you're not implementing them correctly, or the folks that have to implement them aren't supportive, right? It's hard to really get the policy to meet the boots on the ground. Amber, go ahead, Mervin.
I just quickly, so that would go back to me to what Flo was talking about. Why would you not want to hire the guys? What would be your reason for not wanting to hire them when 2 days ago, literally 2 days ago, they were standing next to you doing the job? The only difference is at that time they were incarcerated. Now 2 days later, I'm a free man and I'm come back, hey, hire me to do what I've been doing next to you the last 6 months, and it's a no. And I think it's because of the devaluing of people that were once incarcerated. So I think there's a book called Broken Crayons, right? And I really didn't get that concept until I was talking to a guy one time, and it dawned on me, society treats individuals that were once incarcerated like kids treat broken crayons. If a kid sees a broken crayon, they throw it away because they see no value in it whatsoever. But a broken crayon still colors. it still has value. And if we bring that value back, first we have to change the perception of individuals that have been incarcerated and give them an opportunity. There's many guys that are out there now that have at one time or another that have been incarcerated, that are your neighbors, that are working in optical labs, that are making your glasses, that people are just think the world of and have no idea that at one time or another this individual was incarcerated. Yeah. And I'll leave it with this thought by Dr. King. He says, "You're more than your mistakes. The thing that you did, that evil thing, never has represented all of who you are." And that's our message when we're working with these young men. And I genuinely believe that we restore the value, we restore the worth within the individual and the way society strives in helping these young men turn their lives around.
And I would take it, Merv, I would take your analogy of the broken crayons and take it one step further. And I would say, the reason that we devalue people who have experienced incarceration is because of capitalism, right? It's the socialization that we have into believing that, or into believing that it's less, that folks are less valuable, and therefore that we don't have to care for them in the same way, right? Right. And so the police, so the fire department is arguing against these policies because it means that there are more people that they may have to pay the full wage to be able to fight fires, as opposed to be able to get them for pennies on the dollar, right? And so I often think about your crayon analogy as, but how did the crayons get broken in the first place? Were they in a box and constantly stepped on? And then they broke? Did some of them break themselves because all the other crayons around them were broken? And so they, and so how do you then, and then we devalue those broken crayons, even though they still color. And that's a way to be able to continue capitalism. So I know that's not always the conversation we want to have in spaces around like how the big picture conversation about capitalism, but we have to, because otherwise, to your point, Merv, it doesn't make sense. Why wouldn't you want people who have experience to join your ranks? Well, you don't, because capitalism, because you could have them do that job for way less.
Yep. And we estimate around 8 million people in California, about 20% of the population have a criminal arrest or conviction record. And that, like I said, leads to almost 5,000 barriers, not just for the individual, but their families as well. I think CPEN actually linked to an LA Times article that features one of our folks who has a master's degree in education, who couldn't find housing because of his record, and his family couldn't get housing. We got Amber. I want to get to you on this question, and then we'll move into Q&A for the last 10 minutes or so. But Amber, would love to hear some of your thoughts on where the gaps are. And how would you like to see money, reinvested?
Yeah, so many interesting and juicy threads I want to pick up on. But one thing I would be remiss not to mention, since we have been talking a bit about incarcerated firefighters, is, when folks are released from their time in jail or prison, people who are being targeted by ICE, by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, can be still in California transferred to ICE. This is a voluntary practice that the state of California chooses to still do. California voluntarily chooses to still collaborate with ICE. We passed SB 54 a few years ago, which was a great sort of floor that we set to limit, but not eliminate, limit the amount that counties can collaborate with ICE. So county sheriffs who run our jails are limited in the amount that they can collaborate with ICE. Even within that, sheriffs don't like to follow laws, and so they still will collaborate. I do a lot of work in Alameda County and know that the Alameda County Sheriff, for example, has continued to do that. And if you live in Alameda County, please get connected with Decarcerate Alameda County. There are a bunch of social media links that folks, whoever's managing the chat links, can drop in to follow that work. But because California as a state still chooses to do that, which the Vision Act this year, authored by Assembly Member Rob Bonta, seeks to limit again, because California still voluntarily transfers people to ICE after they are released from prison. One of our incarcerated firefighters, Kausei Lee, was transferred to ICE and is still in ICE detention. So there's a campaign to get Governor Newsom to pardon him so that Kausei Lee can get out of ICE detention. If you'd like to be connected with that work, the hashtag we're using for that campaign is #FreeSeiLee. Salee is spelled Saelee. So you can get connected with that online. But there are bunches of ways that HIP and I work on this. There are 3 coalitions that I'll just name really quickly. So Decarcerate Alameda County that I mentioned earlier. Our platform is to free people from Santa Rita Jail, which is our local county jail. It's the mega jail. It's the 5th largest jail in the country. So free people from Santa Rita Jail, divest from the Alameda County Sheriff's Office, and invest in community health. Just want to note that what Flo was sharing earlier about what happened in Sacramento is very similar to what happens in Alameda County. During this pandemic, in like April, I want to say it was, the Alameda County Board of Supervisors chose to increase the jail budget by $106 million per year. So in addition to the millions and millions and millions they already receive and continue to receive in this bloated Alameda County Sheriff's budget, which for relativity, they chose to increase the jail budget by $106 million per year in the middle of a pandemic where people needed healthcare services, needed housing assistance, etc. The annual operating budget for the Alameda County Public Health Department at the time was $111 million. Like that's their total public health budget, $111 million, and they chose to increase the jail budget by $106. And so terrible. Another coalition HIP is part of is the Dignity Not Detention Coalition, which is a statewide immigrant justice coalition with local, state, and national, and even I think one international organization, really centering the grassroots organizing happening in the places where there are detention centers in California. And that work, a lot of our work is around stopping ICE transfers, which I referred to earlier, which people like Kelsey Lee have been impacted by. And HIP did research on the health impacts of those ICE transfers. And if you want to see that, there are some links that can get dropped, but it's humanimpact.org/health-not-transfers. So if you want a health angle on that. And then we're also involved in a national organization or national coalition called the People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom. There are links for that too. I feel like I'm in an infomercial for organizing. So the People's Coalition for Safety and Freedom seeks to repeal and replace the 1994 crime bill, which our now president, Joe Biden, was the champion for, the author for during his time as a senator in 1994. And the 94 crime bill really built the infrastructure for mass incarceration in this country. It funneled money down to the local level to increase police forces and incarceration. So our coalition is working with, we are a Black-led coalition that is working with local communities to repeal the 94 crime bill and use a people's process centering those who have been most harmed by criminalization and incarceration in the wake of the 94 crime bill to really evaluate what our communities need to thrive and be healthy and to put into place those sorts of structures and policies.
Wow. No, I think you all are dropping so much knowledge, so many links in the chat. So please, folks, I know I'm clicking on the links as you're dropping them right now. This is how we stay connected. This is how we keep connected and building, more power to all of us. So thank you so much for dropping those links in the chat. We got a few minutes to try to get to some amazing questions that we have from the audience. Really quick, one of the questions came in around links, resources to how other counties spent CARES funding. I'm wondering if Flo, Mervin, or Amber, if you all have any links to how other counties spent the CARES funding, or if there's anything in the works on that.
This is a really great question. I know CPEN has been coordinating and brought us together with a bunch of other counties that had similar concerns, and we were actually reaching out to our members of Congress to be able to say, hey, next time you do a CARES authorization that comes down to locals, be a little more specific about how these funds can be spent, because your FAQs that said you can just consider public health and public safety to be approved is what got us into this mess. And so that was, it was on them. And so we wanted them to A, be paying attention, but to B, also say, if you're going to do this in the future, you don't want this to happen, you need to have some more safeguards. Otherwise, it's a black hole and it sucks up the dollars. So I would definitely say CPEN has been a great partner in this and has been tracking what's been happening statewide.
That's great. Great. And I know CPEN will probably have follow-up after this with everyone that's joined. And I think this kind of leads into another one of the questions. that talks about how do we as individuals / advocates or organizations have opportunities to impact a local or state budget. Would love to hear, some thoughts from y'all around that.
Yeah, I'll jump in, and then I want to make sure Amber and Mervin get a chance to say. I will say first and foremost that I personally believe, and this is a belief, I don't have facts, that they intentionally make budgets difficult to understand so that you won't dig deeper. There's no reason your city budget needs to be 432 pages. There is no reason that it has to be written at, a grade 24 level. You can make pie charts, you can break these things down easily. And I think there's an intentional decision not to, because people would be outraged if they found out how much of their money was and where it was going. So that's first and foremost. When I have conversations with people, the first thing I ask is, do you know how much of your city or county's budget is going to law enforcement? And most people think it's 15 or 20%. And they're astonished to learn it's 45, 60, 75%. And so I think one of the best ways to get together, and I'm a part of the People's Budget Sacramento, and we're trying to do exactly that, right? Break the budget down into ways that people can understand, poll them on what they'd like to see, and then actually make it really clear to people that what you're doing is not what we want to see happen. And so I think that's one of the best ways to be able to influence local legislation, is to just be able to figure out what's going on and then gather together with other people. The CARES Act became a debacle because people were the ones who said, wait a minute, this is a mess, not our elected leaders. So the more that we kind of defer and say, oh, well, they've got it taken care of, they know best, we have completely decided that is a lie, right? And so I think getting together in these organizations, we dropped some links in the chat, and being able to participate in that way. You don't have to know budgets like the back of your hand. People can walk you through that process. People can help, but we need people who speak like normal humans, who can say, this is what's happening, or this is what we want. So don't feel as if I know there's a way that we always feel like we are disqualified from participating in conversations. We need everyone. We need people who speak multiple languages. We need people who can do sign language. We need people who can talk about this to their own community in language that you'll understand, and explain the importance of it. And so it can't just be budget wonk. And so that's, I think, the biggest takeaway from this is you can actually make this digestible and get involved, and you don't have to have some fancy background to do so.
And on that note, one of the things I'd like to see is more collaboration within the organization. So you have brother to brother on one end, which is out working with the young men and the people that are actually impacted by some of these decisions when it comes to restorative justice and things like that. And then you have Flo on the other end, who's dealing with policy and budgeting. I think one of the things we can do to help one another is collaborate more, so that when those policies are being created, the voices of the young men and young women that is going to impact the most, their voices are being heard to it, and their concerns are being considered in the policies that are being proposed. I don't think we have enough of that, and but we have to engage the what we call them formerly justice involved individuals. We got to make them a part of the process, because if we do that, not only do we empower the individual, but we empower the entire movement, because we bring in a whole generation of people that were once disenfranchised but are now participating in that process. So I think there needs to be more collaboration between the policy makers and the ones that are proposing that, as well as the ones that are on the ground dealing with it from the other end. And Flo, I'm always available to you.
I love it, Merv. I so appreciate it.
Totally agree. I know we have 2 minutes. I just want to point folks to some resources. Two big resources in sort of like this topic area of California budget making. I see Scott Graves in the participant list, so I'm going to give the California Budget and Policy Center a big shout out. They do an amazing job making resources that are accessible to people and really de-wonk this very wonky process, and make impacting budgets, especially at the state level, really much more accessible. One thing to point out is that we are in the middle of state budget making right now. So this is a really great time to be involved in voicing what you want our state budget dollars to be invested into your state senators and state assembly members. So highly advise you check out the California Budget and Policy Center. And then specific to issues around incarceration, also suggest checking out CURB, Californians United for a Responsible Budget. They do a lot of amazing budget advocacy to try to divest from incarceration and invest in our communities. And then on the local level, my advice to people is always to assume, no matter where you are, no matter where you live, that there is organizing happening where you live. And if you just don't know about it yet, you just got to do some research. I'm involved in organizing from big places like Oakland, where I live, to Lompoc, to McFarland, to LA. There's organizing happening everywhere. And the best thing that you can do is actually invest in building relationships within that organizing over the long haul. You can't just kind of like, you can pop in and out of doing advocacy work, but the better way to do it is actually to really invest, even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's 30 minutes per week, into doing that relationship building to build sustainable relationships. That's actually what's going to make our movements most successful and strongest. And then do local budget work through that organizing.
Well, we are hitting time. There's a ton of questions still left. I think the team over at CPEN is going to help connect folks with the amazing panelists here. There's one question left that if it's okay with the panelists, I'd like to I'll just take it and end with it from what I saw around criminal justice reform and work around California last year. The question is really like, what did COVID and this pandemic teach us or show us about reimagining justice? And I'll say, in the 5-6 years I've been doing advocacy work at the state level, last year did see some of the biggest wins and changes in policy. We did get commitments to close 2 state prisons, y'all. Over 30,000 folks, almost 30,000 folks were released from state prisons. Not enough folks, and too many people still die and are dying still of COVID, but we have seen some major shifts and not these huge upticks in crime that people were worried about, that DAs were saying were going to happen. We saw $0 bail for a good minute. We saw parole changes. We've seen probation changes all in the last year, and much more policing changes at the state level to come. So this is something that we can do. We can raise our voices. And lastly, I think with the crisis came opportunities. We saw housing of folks, right? We saw creative ways to think about this, that we need to continue to hold politicians' feet to the fire. And we have the ideas, like Mervin was saying, we need to bring those people to the table to continue to voice their ideas. So I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank CPEN. I want to thank you all for joining us. Please get in touch with Flo, Amber, and Mervin, because you can see they have a whole lot of knowledge and probably could have held this down by themselves individually. But I really want to thank you all so much for doing this and joining us. And I hope to be in contact with you all soon. Thanks, everyone.